ello. Suele decirse que el motivo fue sencillamente que por culpa de la ambientación que hay en una de las salas, esta no se atrevieron a ponerlo. Bajo el agua hay toda una serie de cadenas y atadas a ellas una gran cantidad de cadáveres que quedan suspendidos, dando una imagen un poco violenta
Wait,
y
are you
oscura,
doing
teniendo en cuenta la
voice
ambientación general del juego.
for the
Además,
stream?
si te fijas bien, parece como que les hayan arrancado los ojos.
Okay.
Y para rematar, dentro de la cripta hay una zona llamada la fosa de los criminales y en ella se ve una montaña de huesos de todas las personas asesinadas. Ya veis por dónde iba la cosa. Sea como sea, la cripta no salió de forma oficial, pero la parte interesante es que no la eliminaron. Aún está dentro del juego y se podía entrar atravesando una pared. Con el tiempo, Blizzard bloqueó mejor la entrada y ya no debería ser posible entrar, aunque lo más seguro es que siga existiendo. Número 3. El mod de Morrowind. En esta historia no hay monstruos, no es un juego maldito y no provocaba la muerte, no al menos de forma directa. El mod de Morrowind con este nombre es uno de los mejores mitos porque no abusa de cosas malditas o fantasmas como dije, sino que suena bastante creíble al menos hasta cierto punto. Los jugadores que lo probaron al principio creían que era un virus, ya que si intentabas instalarlo provocaba que el juego se colgase y borraba las partidas. Con el tiempo alguien averiguó que para poder jugarlo había que utilizar el emulador DOSBox y funcionaba correctamente, pero el mod era extraño. Todos los personajes de las misiones principales estaban muertos y el protagonista perdía la salud poco a poco como si...
When people first stumbled across the idea of modifying your own game, it sounded dangerous. Actually going into the coding of a program and changing it and rearranging and creating scripts to continue a game. For a while, it was kinda dangerous. No one really knew how.
As the community grew, textures started changing. Simple ones like the face of a single rock blossomed into new NPCs, new side missions for other games, and it turned into a really successful way to extend a game's replay value when the original had become dated.
Mods have now been able to categorize themselves as texture packs, side quests, weapons, add-ons, patches, and in extreme cases, an entire other game. Every now and then, however, one will occasionally pass under the radar and not be discovered right away for whatever reason.
For our followers that are fans of Bethesda's flagship franchise, The Elder Scrolls, some of you may remember some trouble being stirred up in the modding community caused by a very obscure and simple mod known as JVK1166Z ESP. This was a Morrowind mod.
The only problem with it was no one ever thought to look at it as a mod, mostly because it didn't behave like one at all. There was speculation going around that it was just a virus conjured up by some computer-savvy troll that knew his way around the system, and thought he would share his mod with others. When people loaded the game with the mod active, the title screen would show for a full hour before crashing and deleting itself completely.
This led to frantic warnings being issued, even by the mod creator himself, saying that the mod was potentially a dud, it didn't work with any up-to-date system, there were some major patches to be worked out, whatever excuse they could come up with just to get people to stop downloading the mod. Expectedly, the mystery and speculation soon turned to apathy, and the craze eventually extinguished due to the mod's inactivity.
This was a book people knew not to judge by its cover. There was always an instinct floating around in people's heads that there was more to this mod that wanted to be explored, and they knew it too, and they didn't quit. There were members of the community that fought tooth and nail to find something that would set it apart from any other mod, and they found it.
A year passed and the mod turned up on a forum, claiming that if you run it on a really old and really simplistic software known as DOSBox, the mod would not only stay active while loading the game, but would automatically open and place you in the mod. This is where things start to get a little unnerving.
Upon entering the mod, you will immediately notice two things. The first is the box that pops up saying that the prophecy has been severed. Walking around in the game, you will start to realize that all of the NPCs having to do with the main quest are dead. You are thrown into a world where your character has failed the main quest, in a dimension of Morrowind where you are doomed from the start.
The rest of the NPCs that have nothing to do with the main quest are there in the game as well, but they just stand there. They do nothing. Attempting a conversation with them will always get you the same response. Watch the sky.
The second thing you will realize is that you are penalized for standing still, as you very gradually lose small increments of your health. This is because during the entirety of the game you are being followed and watched by a creature referred to in the game known as the Assassin.
Creepiest thing about this character is not that he kills you slowly, sometimes without you even realizing it, but that he cannot be killed, interacted with, or even seen until your character is already dead and he already has from you what he wants. His colorless and textureless figure holds resemblance to a spider-like humanoid with viciously long legs and arms, and a very distorted walking pattern. When dead, the replay menu comes up and the assassin makes himself visible as he walks out and starts to mutilate your corpse.
Soon, a dungeon was discovered called the Citadel, and at the end of the dungeon's vast machinery and formidable opponents was a locked door in a room the players nicknamed the Portrait Room. An unnamed person that documented his experience and kept in touch with a friend about the game invested days worth of time into the mod, staying into the game's universe and trying to figure out what was on the other side of the door. Maybe what the NPCs might be telling him could be a word of advice, and watching the sky could be a means of how to tell time in the game.
The person was led to believe that the door would only open during some kind of celestial event. If you died, closed the game, or went into the Citadel, everything would restart and the waiting would be pointless. That meant the game couldn't be left unattended, and the player had to be constantly on the move thanks to the assassin character.
After days of playing, the man finally got closer and closer, and as he progressed, it felt to him as though the game almost tried to fight back in a way. The assassin would start to horrifyingly scream and shriek at his character. You could see him a lot more, and as he played the game, he even noticed that the assassin started to make himself visible more often in the game, almost as though he didn't even care. The enemies never fought back when you struck them, and the rest of the NPCs started to diminish as well, until finally, you and the assassin were the only two active entities in the game.
Days later, when he felt that he was really close to accessing the door, he started having lucid dreams and night terrors about the assassin character killing him during his sleep. He would occasionally see the silhouette of the assassin out of the corner of his eye, when playing or when he got up to take a break. Finally, during his last days of playing the game, he got to where he wasn't even sure what he was living was real anymore, because the dreams had gotten so lucid. The final document he recorded was of a real-life experience he had had with the assassin. He saw his shadow out of his peripheral vision as he began to tap on his glass window.
Once this story gathered some attention, people tried to find the actual JVK mod, only to be sadly disappointed that the mod doesn't exist. The only thing that was found was the original patch where the mod would crash Morrowind upon the launch. After research was done, people finally came to the conclusion that the mod was just a story. That didn't stop modding communities from trying to recreate what they heard, though.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sweet disappointment that this mod never existed, but as you would probably expect, the modding community is nearly, if not already, finished recreating the mod from the story. If that happens, we'll all be able to experience the terror ourselves. Just don't play it too much, and most importantly, watch the sky.
Really, man? Area rankings? Surely there's no reason for you to be a stranger to one of Capcom's flagship franchises. If you haven't played the games, you've seen the movies. And if you haven't seen the movies, you know someone who has. Beginning Hour hasn't seen media spotlight for long, but the remaining uncharted territory left for people to stumble across has been concealed fairly well. Do not underestimate the depth behind this house. A considerable sum of details may just pass you by. Playing through the game without a sense of exploration is not redeeming in the slightest. People who initially were sold on the demo because of its exaggerated comparisons to
I'm trying
PT.
to write scripts, I'm sorry.
What?
Like, I can hear it really loud. I'm sorry.
You want me to mute myself?
Can you turn the volume down through the headphones if that's okay? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe in for a bit of a disappointment.
Is that
Beginning
good?
Hour is a demo that
Yeah,
rewards
thank you.
breaking the rules and penalizes linearity. Only after playing through the demo multiple times could the finer details and crannies make themselves known. For instance, the mannequins found grouped next to the button at the top of the stairs can move, as can the other three. There are even multiple endings that guide the player down an alternate path, yet they all wrap up in the same way, with the player being knocked out, ending the gameplay. We must deem it crucial to take into consideration exactly how cryptic Capcom's developers may have been with this maneuver. Though they've been stubborn on suggesting hints, they've left the exploration up to us, and I believe we found something worth talking about. Beginning Hour, of course, teases the 7th installment of Resident Evil, but there are some reoccurrences of this number, and this motif is stretched throughout the length of the demo. Whether or not this holds any degree of significance has been questioned, but is still ambiguous. Capcom's teasing of the number 7 in both promo covers are, of course, there for obvious reasons, but Capcom may have higher intentions for their enigma. Entering the room under the staircase, the player can observe 7 dolls strung up against the wall, some by their necks, others by their arms and legs. Since we don't know much about the intruder in the house, we could be left to presume these dolls may represent torturous malpractices carried out by the man. It is uncanny to recognize the number of boards impeding the player from opening the basement door and the number of dolls, as there are 7 of both. During the VHS footage, it would be easy to miss out on some of the demo's most mortifying moments. This is where the game suggests a plot that revolves around something other than any virus. These happenings seen around the house may be supernatural, and there are 7 ghost sightings that support that. The ghost, presumably the woman you can find in some of the paintings around the actual house, appears to the player in 7 different instances. Various locations include on the porch outside, on the staircase, and while descending down the ladder. The apparition haunts and antagonizes Clancy throughout the duration of the clip. What's especially haunting is the chained lock on the cupboard, even though the tape you found was in that same location, chained up. Should raise a question or two. 3 mannequins are grouped by the stairs. The demo practically begs you to test the button, and activating it will trigger a prompt from the mannequin behind you. It may turn around and try to greet you, but you need not be alarmed by its brooding presence. Search around and you'll come across 3 others. You'll meet one on the way upstairs next to the phone, and one immediately behind you when you press the button. The third one, well, it'll find you. That leaves only 6 open for discovery, until you consider the loose finger you find in the drawer. Speculation surrounds this item probably more so than any other item in the game. The dummy finger has no definite use, and Capcom's many messages regarding its use has been met with silence. Of course, the lack of evidence may just be Capcom, well, giving us the finger. Wouldn't be the first time. As prominent as it already seems, this motif could be extended even further. There is also a 7 drawn on the box under the television table, and there are a total of 7 doorways you can open in the entire house, including the 2 upstairs. We could always leave discussion room for the threatening note left on the TV containing 7 words, or the piles of 7 cans in the kitchen, but anything past this observation is only cherry picking. I wouldn't put it past Capcom's team to hide their messages. After all, marketing the demo as a successor to Konami's PT would warrant the need to be cryptic on a hyperbolic level. The reoccurrence of this motif may hold a hidden significance, but until any more details are surfaced, it may just be nothing more than a cool observation. We haven't covered much ground yet, but with your word, we would certainly love to. Let us know if you want more. Until next time. The deep web is terminology referring to websites and locations on the internet that require an encrypted connection. This can be supplied through anonymous browsers such as the Tor browser that provide the user with this sort of connection so that they may explore the deeper crevices of the internet at their heart's content. Perusing around the darker crannies of the web can prove to be a challenge not most people are up for. This makes your computer susceptible to plenty of different trojans, viruses, and cookie trackers. It isn't the best move to go in unprepared and without the proper tools.
First reported on the channel Obscure Horror Corner on the month of June in 2015. The game was met with bewilderment and confusion. Later, the game went viral after being exposed to the surface levels of the web and attracting plenty of attention from numerous press websites. The game known as Sad Satan achieved popularity on an international level. So, what exactly is so creepy about this game? The anonymity of the developer continues to puzzle plenty of people. The meat of the game involves the player walking around in a poorly rendered black and white hallway, wandering aimlessly with no clear objective. Once people started playing the game for themselves, however, intrigue soon gave way to fear.
The game starts, and the player is thrust into a nightmarish hallway of which there is no clear purpose or objective, other than to simply start walking and wait for the game to tell its story. It would be foolish to hunt around for any sort of underlying theme or meaning, of which there is likely none. After a couple minutes, the walls of the hallway will become saturated with really deep black and white tones, and haunting audio samples will begin to slowly bleed through and penetrate the silence. Somewhat tame at first, what the player hears will start to become unsettling, and then just become downright mortifying.
Some of the sounds played as the hallway gets darker are chants, repetitious slurs, broken music boxes, and terrifying screams. Blisteringly loud screams that make the player feel like they are being tortured. All of the audio in the game seems to be incredibly low quality, as most people can just barely discern what exactly the sounds are supposed to be. Occasionally, questionable imagery will pop up on screen at random intervals of time, and it's almost never something pleasing to the eye. It can result in anything between a strange family portrait to grotesque images of gore and violence. Some who have played the game have even reported instances of seeing child pornography while playing.
The only other characters in the game in which you can interact with are childlike figures that simply stare at the player without any indication of moving. The player runs into one child in particular, which does contact damage upon you noticing him. It is here where the game presumably ends, because there is no player that has ever reached beyond this point. The aesthetic of the game can be described as psychedelic and obtrusive to the player. Its origin of development is still largely up for question, but many people claim to have solid evidence that the developer of the game was a criminal and a pedophile, which explains how he was able to get so many clips of the screams heard in the game that can't be found anywhere else.
On top of the disturbing imagery and the questionable background, People who went into the deep web unprepared were met with horrible viruses that took control of their computer. Downloading the game from the deep web proved to attract malicious content to their system, resulting in some of the imagery even being saved as documents to their hard drive. The images would then open randomly, even after they finished playing.
Pepsi.
When the game reached an international level of recognition, speculation started to make its way around. People started wondering which version was the original version posted on the deep web. The YouTube channel, Obscure Horror Corner, has been pinned as the developer of the game many times since its channel was the first to introduce the rest of the internet to this game. But after people have done their fair share of digging around, that might not even be true.
The username ZK has been brought up in conversation many times. An anonymous subscriber to the Obscure Horror Corner channel recommended that the YouTuber feature gameplay of the video game in one of their future videos due to its sinister nature. A couple weeks later, a 12-minute video of the game surfaced on the channel. A few days later, the owner of this channel was contacted by Kotaku. As it turned out, the link that was given in the description contained invalid characters to make others who followed the link think it was broken or the game had simply been taken down. He later confirmed that the game in fact did have instances of gore and child pornography, and the invalid link was placed to divert people away from actually downloading it.
Most of the images in the game seem to be highly symbolic of child abuse and criminal acts towards children. The childlike figures in the game, the grotesque imagery and audio clips,
Alright,
all seem to
another one's
reference
done.
a similar predicament and that a child was murdered or abused in some malevolent way. This feeds the speculation that the game may have been developed by someone with this sort of background and was created as a device to torture himself out of guilt of what he had done. A couple months pass, and the game seemed to fall off the radar until more information about the audio clips that were played came out. The game depends heavily on the distorted and reversed audio clips that all have something in common. The person seems to be speaking, only vaguely covered by static sound or other obstructions.
These are recordings of interviews. Interviews of various murderers such as Charles Manson. Some of the images displayed are images of other famous criminals, such as Jimmy Savile, in reference to his allegations of sexual abuse, and Rolf Harris, a musical artist who was later pinned with similar charges.
The common belief is that the copy of the game that contained suggestive material, such as the grotesque imagery, was deemed as the original. A user on 4chan by the name of
Hey,
ZK,
Chi.
the same username as the person that recommended the game to
Yeah?
the owner of the YouTube channel,
Can I tell you something
posted
really
the
messed up?
original version
I had
of
an
the
idea.
game, claiming that this was the
Maybe
true version of Sad
if
Satan
people
that was meant to be
had the
played.
right pumped
The
up
speculation
kicks,
around
then maybe
this
they
obscure
could have
tale
outran the
continues
bullets.
to build, even after many months since its initial release.
That's true.
But
That's
we
true.
can be more than positive that the original
How would they
version
know
of the
which
game
one were the
has
right?
been buried beneath months of rumors and obscurity.
I don't know.
If you liked what you saw, please subscribe or share this video with a friend.
Just come in and
If you'd
just
like us to cover a topic, please
No.
leave us a comment below. We're always
I hope you get the reference.
Yes, I did.
That was my favorite episode.
on Halloween of 2010, Notch believed it necessary to address the boredom of many Minecraft users after years of the game growing stagnant. And so, a new update was given to
I
the
have
community
4
in the
people
form of a
watching.
hellish, otherworldly realm known as
Pretty sure one of them
the
is
Nether.
here, but
Yep, I am. Be right back. I'm gonna go.
The Nether was
Put
an
on my
additional
apron.
biome that was
For worky
kindled by a
work.
community-wide urge to explore and raid the land.
'Cause you
And in
gotta
the
go
effort
work,
to deploy a more original game, the initial title, Hell,
Here we-
was immediately scrapped in lieu of its current title, The Nether. The additional dimension featured a gathering of terrifying ghouls and demons that shred about, boastfully defending their territory from any passers-by. Molten rock leaked from the cracks and crevices of every opening, and any technology you may have crossed dimensions with is now rendered completely useless, as the clocks and compasses lose all control and go haywire in your quick select menu. As eager as the community was to take to their explorative heels and dig in, it didn't take long for the nether to be picked clean. The momentum of excitement plateaued again, and the game's loyal users were on the prowl for something bigger, something more interesting. The End is a dimensional level in Minecraft with a static, empty, floating island. The entire landscape consists of only a single floating island with obsidian pillars and several hauntings of Endermen patrolling the plane. Originally titled The Sky before its release in 1.8, the End was planned to have several smaller islands navigable by isolated portals to and from the lands. Accessibility was a chore, as the player is required to hunt Endermen, vile demonic creatures of the End, sculpted to resemble the fictitious cryptid Slenderman. Their emissive red eyes and gaping mouths were a horror unlike anything the game had ever seen. When confronted, an Enderman would swell with rage and proceed to attack. There are other similarities between the creature and the urban myth, such as its ability to teleport and its notable dislike when a player stares at him for too long. Hunting one down and killing one is difficult, but you will be rewarded with an Ender Pearl, a mysterious pearl with the ability to teleport you to wherever you throw them. You must track down 12 of these and craft them into Eyes of Ender in order to repair and activate the End portal located in a specific stronghold. The eyes you have crafted will be your guide in finding the stronghold. Find it, plug in the eyes, and the portal will open, revealing a static, empty sky. There are several similarities the End shares with the Nether that you may pick up on when exploring. Your compass is still hindered in functionality by the dimensional transport. It searches and searches for a magnetic north, but can never seem to find it. The clock works the same way as well, and it will struggle to precisely find the positions of the sun and the moon without any reference to the overworld. This can be seen in both your quick select slot below, and when you have the item equipped. The animations are still the same. Beds will still explode violently and kill the player if one attempts to craft one and sleep. Fires will burn on bedrock, but will not spread naturally. But describing the uselessness of your technology in this frightening dimension is only trivializing it. You see, this realm has a guardian. He isn't interested in keeping its domain safe or preserving the health of his dimension. The only thing he guards is your way out. He keeps himself surrounded by ender crystals to maintain his vitality and strength. They are built high up on obsidian pillars that require a little thinking to reach them. Shooting them down with an arrow is just as efficient as scaling the pillar and attacking it up close. Taking them down one by one allows closing in on this beast to be much less of a hassle. His personal guards consist of a militia of Endermen, spawning and attacking in overwhelming numbers. It's in your best interest to keep your greatest distance from them. In the console editions of the game, however, the Ender Dragon returns to his nest after flying around for a few seconds to fend off the growing army of Endermen, as he believes their intentions are to steal his prized hatchling. The teleporting abilities of the Endermen can be intimidating, and attacking one of them can trigger a hostile response from a crowd of them at once. They are relentless as they are strong. Unless there are external forces such as rain or running water that threaten the pursuer, the Enderman will continue to haunt and chase you down through any forest or over any river. The Endermen behave much differently in the End dimension. Initially docile creatures in the overworld, the only way to aggravate the creature would be to simply stare at it. In the End, things go a bit differently. Their attack patterns are completely arbitrary, and they can and will swarm you if you aren't paying attention. Slaying the dragon and seizing the egg as your own is the only foolproof method of exiting the End dimension, and I can't imagine why you would want to stick around for any longer than you have to. Re-entry into the overworld before slaying the beast is impossible. Either it dies, or you do. You are your hands fastened tight around the grips of your controller. You await certain death, but it does not come. When playing a good horror game, there are a few things that resonate with the player more than describing that sinking pit in your stomach when you see something disturbing. Your breath is shallow, and you feel like you're swallowing a piece of your soul with every gulp.
There isn't a huge surplus of scarier locations in the new Fallout game, but the large dugout made possible by Dunwich Borers LLC can remind us of the beauty subtlety plays in storytelling. It's not something you just bump into, it's a plot that requires digging and putting pieces together.
When we thought we saw the last of that accursed name, Dunwich, we tossed the book into the flame. The Krivekni was absorbed into the obelisk we saw, buried into the underground recess of the Dunwich building. The book was destroyed and the ghouls were vanquished. For a moment, Dunwich was without spotlight.
Fast forward to our travels in the Commonwealth, and we see the same name pop up again. Dunwich Borers, the company responsible for the large quarry we're looking at right now, valued progress and efficiency over the safety of their workers. Poke around in the terminals down below the dugout for a bit, and you'll see what we mean.
Richard Dunwich was a man obsessed with his legacy as a businessman, tapping into powers he didn't understand at all for the exchange of having a company or two in his pocket after it was all over. His latest venture has thrown his workers into turmoil at the hands of the many ghouls that inhabited the tunnels below the dugout.
Even the surface of the hole looks as though it were pulled from a Stephen King novel. A cooker can be seen in the middle of the workspace with fresh corpses chained up to the crude device as though they were being tortured or interrogated. Or maybe they were horrified at a specific site and threw themselves in there. Who knows?
More awaits us inside. The working conditions are
Hello.
disgusting beyond
You
anything
dressed up?
else. The caverns and tunnels are
dressed up
peppered with the corpses of
for
workers,
the
possibly
mass
of
shooting on
overexhaustion,
Okay.
alcohol intoxication, or
Hey,
maybe a force much
let's
more
leave. Can we
malevolent.
mute the stream for like a
Here's
little
where
bit?
it is imperative
Or, like,
to
our
explore a
voices?
bit
Just
and
make
dig
it,
deeper than you
music
normally would.
only.
The terminals contain both updates from higher staff and long entries from individual workers. It seems as though they all have
Thanks.
one common complaint.
That means you're gay.
What? Because when I fuck you, you're gonna. I see your back the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's, we are kids incorporated.
Wait, did you sing that with the Old Town rhythm?
I didn't intend it.
Sing it again.
We are kids incorporated. I'm gonna take my storage to the outset island. Read till I can't no. I got the kids in my van. I got the little kids in my van. Pull on them with my
With your ham.
make 'em- pull on them with my make them pull on my hand. Got the Jason got a Japanese copy of Wind Waker. Old Spice Orange GameCube. Japanese copy of Wind Waker.
Have you been
Ryan PC. He's like a dog. Like if you like shake a copy of Wind Waker from him, he's like Alex, Wind Waker. He's like Wind Waker. Are you gonna have tea time soon?
Yeah, after I do the line art of this thing.
Okay. Fat. You're a kitty cat fat. Is that a thing?
Maybe.
Kitty big titty.
Kitty big titty. What?
I don't know. Cutie big booty.
I'm gonna take my horse to the autumn road. I'm gonna ride till I can no more. Got horse in the bed. Horse is dead.
You like that song a lot?
No. You know what happens whenever I listen to too much?
You would
TikTok.
not believe your eyes.
You would not believe your eyes. You would not believe your eyes. You would not believe your eyes.
You would not believe your eyes.
Someone actually
Would
made that a
not
remix. Like
your-
it's an actual thing.
I've seen Fireflies, but every lyric is in alphabetical order.
Oh, I love that one. Listen to it like 3 or 4 times.
Or the Megalovania one is like.
Yeah.
Water.
I did not expect that song to become a meme actually.
You got them windows back. Looks like it's attached. So I looked at the text and they're like, apparently they're like this kitchenware firm or something like that, where they manage like kitchens or something like that. And they want me to like help as a representative.
Oh, they want you
I
to
don't know
go
if they
door
want
by
me-
door selling stuff.
I don't know if it's that because it's paying $18 an hour. I don't know about door-to-door salesmen being paid that much.
I see.
Part of me wants to take it, but another part of me wants to make sure we can still have our 3 weeks off for the trip.
Well, it's a really nice offer.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
How about you tell them that?
I could
Like,
for help.
tell them, like, I have an important trip I have to go to in August
Wait, it
for
says,
3 weeks.
can I say one thing?
Yeah?
It says Matthew Wally just started with us, and our office is looking for help, and they recommended you for the position. It's with Vector, and we were recently named ECA's National Advisory Board Partner of the Year. It's basic customer work, like explaining products, answering questions, and helping to place orders.
Wait, they say you can
Market,
work from home.
we market Cutco, a line of housewares and kitchen items made in the USA. Feel free to apply, and we'll contact you soon in regards to arranging. Could be.
In the message, it said, like, we know you live far away, so you could work from home.
I don't know, like the whole like, how is what I'm doing like that a position? How is that worthy of $18 an hour?
I don't know, but it sounds cool.
What, the $18 an hour, or just,
Sounds better than what you're doing now, overall.
yeah. I just don't know how they're gonna feel like, oh, this new guy wants to work here. Hey, I want to take off 3 weeks. I don't know.
That's what I'm telling you. You should, when you go apply, you tell them, I have an important trip already scheduled. I hope you guys don't mind.
If they say no, then fine. I'll just be like, okay then.
Yeah. Like, I tell them, like, I'm willing to work and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you or not, but I think I've expressed how tired I am of my job right now. Corner market.
Yeah, you have.
It's disgusting. All like I've told you about the vomit in the trash can, getting that stuff out, and the garbage and getting dirty and everything. I was also pissed off over the fact that we have in our break room that was specifically people who do my like dirty work stuff. In my break room, like we had a refrigerator and it's been broken for like 4 or 5 months and they've yet to fix it, but they keep the refrigerator in the office fixed for the people who do all the other stuff.
Did you bring that up for your boss?
I did. He says that he got one of us working on it, like one of the others, not the boss. It was a worker to fix it. You know?
I see.
Anyway, I'm at work now. I'm gonna go in. Okay, I love you. I hope you have a good rest. And can I call you on my break?
Yeah, you can call me on your break.
Can I feed you on my break?
Yeah, that too.
Wait. Okay, I love you.
Love you. Take care.
Eat well when I'm done, okay?
Okay, I promise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'm gonna ride till I get no more. Got pushes in the back. Statue.
Become less and less of a possibility. The wooden door opens, and suddenly the mine is silent. Heavy drones will occasionally rumble and shake the dig site like something is trying to move around.
It can be seen in one of the terminal logs that the rumbling is something that's been mentioned before, labeled as a hazard that workers should be aware of and ready to respond to if necessary, as the ramifications could be dangerous to one's life. The hazard prevention and safety protocol may not have been as effective as the workers thought, or maybe they were interested in something else.
At this point, the corpses become overwhelming. Lacerations can be seen on certain bodies. Smells like ferals. The appearance of the walls become less chiseled and more abstract and random, making it seem like the workers started to become frenzied and disorganized at one point. Getting ready to fight as you head down. You should be wary of the ghouls that will be awaiting their prey.
Suddenly, a flashback. Workers, before the war. They were normal and more than happy to serve their company. 2 look to be taking a rest from the grind, and the 3rd seems occupied enough, but you're only allowed a second or 2 to take in the details before the flashback fades, and you're left to deal with the ghouls there, who possibly may have been the same 3 workers we just saw.
There is a similar instance further down where we are given insight via flashback on a sacrificial ceremony that took place. The ringleader of sorts brandishes a pale, rusty blade, and several workers are tied down and restrained. The flashback fades again, and the ghouls attack. Not just your average run-of-the-mill ghoul, either. Ghouls with actual identities. The same people that slaved away in these horrible conditions before the war.
The pedestal at which he was standing looks to be cut out into a watering hole, where you can sink down and find a withered altar with 2 mini nukes and a blade named Kremva's Tooth. And something else. What's that? Buried underneath the rubble, a section of facial features that are likely a part of something larger.
The holotapes you will find throughout your excavation provide informative details on the motives of some of the workers holed up in the mines. They weren't that flattering.
Tim Shoots here. No suspicions were raised when the new equipment was brought in the other day. Crew at Station 4 are still under the impression that we are setting up a new station beyond this area. The standing crew you hired are convincing enough. However, do worry about the project managers at the other stations, especially Bob at Station 1. We all know he takes his job very seriously. Bullet point updates bug the hell out of me. My gut tells me figure out something's going on down here sooner rather than later. Please advise.
Tim, good job on keeping things under wraps. We've taken your advice and have asked the other project managers to meet you at Station 4. Stall them if they arrive before we get there. They haven't been told anything. We are very close to accomplishing our goal. Please be patient. You will be rewarded in time.
Looks like the operation fell victim to sabotage early on. When a shipment team brought in new equipment, it seemed as though it was invested in to save money for something rather than preserve the safety of the workers. If that's not devious enough, a group also makes a remark about looking convincing when carrying it in, so they're obviously not here to dig for minerals. What were these guys trying to find?
Bethesda's infatuation with Lovecraftian lore may be useful to surface here, as the Dunwich building in the previous game gave us a flashback to a pre-war scene as well, and also involved a ghoul with an identity, named Jamie. The speculation can start with the facial features we see rooted beneath the ground.
The rumbling we heard was passed off by other workers as the progress they were making when they dug down further. At least, that's what they had been told to believe. But the tremors we heard through the caverns may have been this creature attempting to unearth himself.
This titan-like creature may hold the responsibility for why the workers became so frenzied. The walls become more natural, deeper down into the cave, and lose their chiseled appearance, and the number of ghouls increase really quickly. The workers that were operating in the quarry weren't looking for anything. They were being manipulated.
They were being brainwashed by this creature's power, and they were influenced to cast aside all expenditures that did not give them progress towards a deeper hole, which is why safety slowly started deteriorating. Plenty of workers started becoming suspicious of their condition, and some were even driven to their sanity's end, which resulted in motives that led to danger and sacrifice.
Seems unnatural, and kind of preposterous. Until you explore the stack of stones and rubble adjacent to the dugout. Labeled Hugo's Hole, the radiation signs that suggested poisoning and death upon entry were enough to prevent the workers from exploring too deep into the crevice.
There's not much to be found except a few traps and a single man, shot dead, loaded pistol by his side. Listening to the holotape you can find on him clears up any confusion you may have.
Guys don't bother me anymore. That's good. I think it's... What was that? Can't they read the signs? quarry. It's been too long. No, I can't. The guys would never let me in. I could kill them all. No. No, that wouldn't be what it would want. It's time to lay down. Yes, of course. It's next to my bed. I will. It's loaded.
A delusional worker trying to pick up the pieces of his scattered thoughts before finally ending his own life. Killing all the workers wouldn't be desirable because of the creature's needs to escape from its earthly prison. Sounds like Hugo has heard more of the creature's voice than anyone in the quarry would ever wish to. If you have something you'd like us to cover, please let us know. We're always taking requests. Until next time. It's no mistake Shadow of the Colossus received the recognition it did. Thanks to a viral marketing campaign spearheaded by Sony and the cooperation of nearly 40 team members, Shadow of the Colossus had stood the test of time as a classic, and a great blueprint of what makes an exceptional game. The minimalistic levels and environments are only matched by its memorable story and simplicity. Your character is Wander, a warrior with an ancient blade and a powerful drive to restore the life of a maiden named Mono. He enlists the help of a ghostly entity, Dorman, and is given the task of executing all 16 colossi in the Forbidden Land to rejuvenate his power. Of course, it's wasted breath to reiterate the plot of such a timeless game, as I'm positive many already know the story. Team Ico have earned their reputation as excellent developers, but the initial demo had quite a few hurdles that needed to be addressed before the official launch. There are reports of some gamers that bought the disc that were interested so much in the game, their curious spirit took them all the way to the Secret Garden, an area of the game that shouldn't be accessed via the demo, and is one of the most well-hidden and indiscoverable places in the entire Forbidden Land. If you are keen enough to search for it and skilled enough to make it to the top, you'll find the Secret Garden, a platform in the game deemed unreachable by the developers, and it will soon be evident why when you start to search the vicinity. Everything looks unfinished. The textures don't always match up right, and some surfaces will glitch, allowing you to pass through them. The most famous example in this case is the bridge, where you walk across the extended bridge for a few seconds before finding an ill-rendered spot on the ground that you can pass through and fall to your death. Right in the middle of the inner garden entrance, you'll see displayed quite flamboyantly an unfinished model of a decapitated female body. It isn't much to look at, but this intangible model has kindled more theories about the game than anything in the actual game itself. On top of being downright creepy as hell, this glitch has a story to tell along with it. Most gamers that stumbled across the statue immediately started linking it back to Ico, an unofficial prequel to the Shadow of the Colossus that uses plenty of similar techniques in companionship and the structure of the enemies you fight. One character you defended in the game was a defenseless woman that went by the name of Yorda. After the official launch gave time for the glitch to be received by others, many argued its significance to Mono's death throughout the game. After Wander has executed all 16 of the Colossi as he was tasked, Dorman gains the strength to be reawakened. His power was expelled from him and distributed among the 16 idols that called the Forbidden Land home. Only using Wander and his desire to restore life to Mono as a weapon against him, Dorman rises after the necessary obstacles have been cleared, and all of the conditions are primed for him to recollect his energy and stand tall once again. Despite the ensuing tension, Dorman remains faithful to his promise, and Mono is given a spark of life. The Scarecrow-esque statue is completely intangible, and your character can easily pass through it without any sort of resistance. Plenty of other miscellaneous glitches and bugs plague the garden. The textures in the canal are either really fidgety or missing entirely. Leaping into the bottom of the canal will almost guarantee your character getting trapped and unable to move out of the glitch. Developers never offered any clear quote to set us all straight on the mystery of the headless girl on top of the garden platform. This leaves us in the dark about whether the existence of this model might point to something much more significant about the lore of the universe, or the less desirable alternative. It's simply a statue without a head and nothing else. An overhyped horror story told and grown through a harmless rendering error. It's difficult to come across actual demo footage with this decapitated girl, as the demo is well over 10 years old at this point. A quick YouTube search can bring up a couple amateur videos here and there, but nothing of much else. The myth of its significance was declared by most fans void and meaningless after the first year of its release, leaving only the possibility that the developers meant for this structure to not be in the final product, which is of course why it remains hidden in an obscure and hard-to-reach area of the game. I know no one has to be reminded of the 17th Colossus rumor that told of an enigmatic Colossus hidden away in the game that you could actually fight and kill. Beating the game on all modes, including the time attack trials, supposedly unlocked a secret narrow passageway somewhere in the game that would allow Wander to access the labyrinth of Colossus number 17. Team Ico's director originally intended 48 Colossi to make the game feel truly massive, but the limited power of game systems, of course, could not handle so much. Eventually the number was cut in half to 24, whereas 16 of them were able to make it into the final project. The other 8 were preserved in an art book, where fans gave them names and personalities. As everyone worth their salt in research knows, no other Colossi exist. The troubling incident with the decapitated girl began some speculation. What if there is another buried Colossus hidden beneath the map? An unfinished project abandoned and left to perish underneath the dimensions of the game, hidden away by the developers because it couldn't make it into the final launch. There is no accessible entrance, nor is there an actual Colossus, but a couple of ledges and stairways located around the secret garden do prove to be of interest to some players. There is a set of stairs that look to be accessible near the back slope of the garden, but it's impossible to get to. Many people believe that for the longest time, that entryway suggested another area of the game that one could actually explore. Sadly, the Forbidden Land has its limits. What started as a harmless flaw in programming kindled one of the spookiest lore controversies in the PlayStation 2 generation. If you have anything else you may want to see, please let us know in the comments. We are always taking requests. Until next time.
I grant to you a soldier with no heart, one that will not falter in the darkness. The soldier who has no heart is your twin image, a shell of yourself that you will shed when your song commands it.
When Majora's Mask was launched back in early 2000, it became widely accepted as a classic, with high replay value and a distinct method of storytelling and atmosphere one can only attribute to the game itself. A truly original masterpiece. There are people still popping this game in with flurries of excitement like it was released just earlier this week. It was one of the first games that presented the feeling of actually going on an adventure.
But things started changing a few years after that. Internet horror stories and unusual phenomena labeled creepypastas seemed to take over the web and fill the internet with their sinister narrative. People started believing them, And there were a few authors that even emerged from their grottos to alert people of their fictitious origin, and how they were only stories not meant to be taken seriously.
Jedusable were one of those that came under fire. Catching the creepypasta surge pretty early out of the game, he documented his experience playing what was believed to be something no one on the web had ever heard of. And when people pondered the possibility, it became horrifying. A haunted video game. A Nintendo cartridge. Majora's Mask.
The story of Jedusable is told through journals, computer entries, and captured video footage from what he directly saw in the game. In such entries, he combats an apparition after purchasing a Majora's Mask cartridge from a yard sale hosted by a sinister-looking old man.
Thinking nothing of it, he reacted out of gut instinct and asked what the old man wanted for the game cartridge. He responded by charitably giving him the game free of charge. He didn't even consider until he returned to the comfort of his dorm that maybe his intentions weren't that charitable.
Up until 2010, the internet had never heard a story like this before. To plenty of people, this was something new and something very real. On September 7th of that year, he started noticing certain glitches in the game. It looked as though it were being hacked. Misplaced textures, graphical glitches, and a pre-existing save file named Ben.
Ben. That name appeared quite a bit in the game Jedusable was playing. Not even beginning with new save data seemed to cleanse the character's name, because in some of the NPC's dialogue, they still called the player Ben. In response, Jedusable dismissed it as nothing more than the side effect of a hacked cartridge, and deleted the Ben save data.
Things started getting weird. Even while not playing the game, Jedusable felt a looming presence. He showed his doubts towards religion, and he didn't believe himself to be accepting of the paranormal, but that's what it was starting to look like. NPCs wouldn't even call him anything. There would just be a blank underscore where the character's name should be. Nothing.
At this point, Jedusable is coming to terms with his mistake and starts to consider the option he at first repressed, which was paranormal interference. The footage the person has with his profile has been documented and captured by Jedusable himself, and what you are looking at right now is actual gameplay from the supposedly haunted game cartridge.
Music is being played backwards, Link's walking animations are janky and glitchy, entire chunks of levels and environments are missing. It's a mess. The game proceeds to encounter even more trouble when an elegy statue of Link seems to follow him wherever he goes in the level, consistently disappearing and reappearing directly behind the character a few seconds later.
The player soon began to be intimidated by the statue, and there would be times where the statue would chase him into a corner and trap him. He reported once, early on into the captured footage, that the happy mask salesman would appear and scream into the monitor before he would see both Link and the statue staring at him through the screen of the game. There would be scenes and animations in the game that were not programmed in the original launch, or even seen in any hacked or emulated version of the game. A few instances of this happening would be during a battle with Skull Kid, in which Link would be levitated upwards from his back and set on fire. The death animation was surprisingly graphic and a little disturbing for a console of such limited capacity. This would go on to happen 3 more times, and Jedusable even documents getting frustrated with the game at this point, and he considers shutting it off. The game loads again, revealing something truly haunting. An image of Link, only dead, simply laying there. The Skull Kid laughs hysterically. He tries to press every button on the controller, yielding no effect. He tries to turn the game off and reload the save several times, only to come back to the exact same screen of Link's dead body.
Jedusable describes in vivacious and very specific detail a few dreams he had overnight while trying to sleep, including the elegy statue chasing him. He recalls the sense of otherworldly dread and despair he felt while playing through the clock tower level.
When he returned to the game, he found another save file, one he recognized. It was the bin save file, as though it had been resurrected and restructured to appear back on his system. Selecting it, he was immediately thrust into complete chaos. Link's body was contorted. An elegy statue was summoned behind him, and it seemed to whisk him away to another part of the game. At this point, he might as well not even be playing the same game anymore.
This time determining a field. He looked human enough and the game looked regular enough to continue playing. The happy mask salesman standing beside another empty elegy statue was waiting to greet him. Jad Usable describes the next few minutes of gameplay to be very horrifying.
Link is set ablaze once again, similar to the animation when being in the room with the Skull Kid, but this time more cinematic and flamboyant. The game skips to his Zora transformation. Epona, his horse, seems to nudge out to the distant waters ahead, suggesting the player needs to swim there.
So he does. He goes deep below the surface. A stone, immovable silhouette of something blocks his view. Zora sees the elegy statue beneath the surface, staring at him, staring at the player. Despite being able to breathe underwater, Zora then goes into a choking animation, gasps for air, and then dies on the ocean floor.
After being returned to the start menu, the save files have changed names again. This time, two save files are respectively named Ben and Drowned. Jad Usable believed this to be a paranormal statement clarifying the circumstances of Ben's death.
The creepypasta continues to highlight specific details in the footage, including efforts of communication by the paranormal entity. Throughout the progression of the story, Jad Usable documents numerous logs and conversations he had with an internet AI named Cleverbot. He said he could feel it beckoning to him, trying to communicate with him. And for the bulk of the conversation, Cleverbot seemed to communicate and talk to him as Ben.
Ben was a kid in the neighborhood. Jad Usable remembers talking to a man that lived in that neighborhood. He referred to a kid named Ben. Apparently, there was a tragic accident that no one in the neighborhood really desired to open up about. It was too traumatizing, said the man, and he wouldn't divulge anything else after that.
There was no way to contact the old man. He was already gone. The day after Jad Usable was sold the video game cartridge, he returned there to find a for sale sign on his door. At this point, it seemed like all of his options for direction had vanished, and he was left alone to decipher the mystery of a deceased child and his favorite video game.
He had dreams. Jad Usable would document his nightmares of the elegy statue following him, but one nightmare in particular would stand out. The Moon Children. Turning him into an elegy statue, sewing up his face, puncturing his arms and legs with thick needles, making him into something else completely.
Jad Usable described them as hideous, disfigured faces with maggots crawling out of their eyes and skin pores. The happy mask salesman was in the dream too. Suddenly, the procedure stopped, and the Moon Children just looked down at him with pity. The salesman ripped off his mask and spoke. "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?"
During its time of validation, people didn't really know how to take this story. In the year of 2010, creepypastas and internet horror stories were a new trend that just gained momentum over the past couple months with stories such as Slenderman, Smile.jpg, and Jeff the Killer, with the story of Ben soon climbing to the top tier of the most recognized horror stories out there.
But that's the thing. These stories are written, recorded, and sometimes even staged and hacked in this case for one's own purpose of entertainment. During this time, there were tons of people that genuinely believed some of these stories, which caused bouts of insomnia, paranoia, and even instances of tragedy.
These stories are fictitious. In fact, the writer of this story admittedly addressed the existence of Ben as false and only for another's enjoyment. Being scared is perfectly okay, but when we are terrified of these stories to an unhealthy extent, that is when we let them become real.
If you liked what you saw, please subscribe or share this video with a friend. If you'd like us to cover a topic, please let us know in a comment below. We're always taking requests. Until next time.
Six years ago, when the sand first dusted our feet in the District of Columbia, we were given a land. A mystery far too massive to unfurl in just a few nights, so we spent weeks upon months putting a light on anything and everything that caught our attention.
So we started searching.
Piece by piece, we took the shroud and pulled it back, revealing some of the scariest and most secretive locations and hideouts in the wasteland. You'll find here in the Commonwealth, the same shroud has been pulled over our heads, so we may have the privilege of exploring it once again. Mass hysteria is a virus, a contagion. The smallest outbreak can erupt and blossom into a nation-sized madhouse, flinging themselves from civilization to avoid getting swept up by the madness. The most notable case of this instance is the Salem witch trials in Boston. It's difficult to imagine anything of this intensity happening today. Hearings and prosecutions of people believed to share a connection with demons and dark energy were a thing of the bleak and uneducated past. This episode marked one of the nation's most violent cases of hysteria and dread. But you're not here for a history lesson, I presume. The Museum of Witchcraft in Fallout 4's Salem served less as a historical bookmark and more of a bitter reminder of the human capacity for violence. You won't find any black cats or broomsticks in this crater. Salem is home to mostly mirelurks and other species of terror. The museum does look quite suspicious, though. The entrance is completely chained up, impeding any and all who wish to take the obvious approach and burst through the front door. You are prompted to try and budge the door, but it doesn't open, and your character says it's locked, and you'll have to search for another way inside. This is also the only noteworthy landmark within radius of anything in Salem. The remnants of the city are swamped with nothing but crowds of mirelurks. This building begs an explanation. Well, it has one. Around the bend of the front door is a deceased body that looks like it's seen a few years before their last breath. Gripped by age and decay, Private Hart's cause of death looks pretty malevolent to begin with. Makes you wonder what happened to the rest of the squadron. The holotape looted off of her body can tell you all of what you need to know.
Jeffries, Lee got the recorder working. So this the sort of detail you had in mind when you signed up for the Gunners? Hauling luggage from Linwoods for some robot butler? What was his name? Wellerton? Wellingham?
Not now, Private. Where's Connors? He's not at his post.
Oh, sorry, sir. The lieutenant said he found some tracks. Wanted to check them out. Private Martin.
Tracks? What track? What the hell is that?
Oh my... Connors! Where's the rest of him?
Jesus. Found us. Sergeant Lee, grab the case. Do not let that thing out of your sight. Everyone inside the museum, now!
Major! Major, what found us?
With the Gunners involved, the mission's obscurity and blurry motive should come as no surprise. From what we can gather, there was a cargo delivery mission that went horribly south. In an attempt to flee from an unnamed predator, the team tried their best to confine themselves into this museum. What happened afterwards was simply hiding and praying. Whatever found them, as the holotape suggested, was likely something to do with the cargo they were transporting. You can even hear the ignorance in Private Heart's voice. She questions what was capable of tracking them down, and then is wrecked with disgust when she finds the carcass of one of her squad mates. We can assume Private Heart never made it in. A single open cellar door invites you into the museum, and instantly you are greeted with a heavy stomping from the floor above you. Whatever they heard on the holotape is still in here. The growls are familiar. Making your way through the basement portion of the building will allow you to see the aftermath of what the creature has done. The beast will still be gnawing on his dinner when you arrive. Bodies are yanked up from behind the wood planks and then tossed back down to you like paper into a trash can. The melted candles and skeletons of children doesn't help the mood either. Judging by the desks and blackboards, most of these rooms used to be classrooms. Traversing through the dilapidated schoolrooms and torn out walls, you'll see a staircase leading to the upper floor. Suddenly, everything is silent. Nothing but a stage, and a few mannequin displays, one of which is hanged by a nearby tree. Whatever play these mannequins were posed to be performing, I can't imagine it being too cheerful. But if you wander around for a few seconds and stay too long, you'll find something big. A savage deathclaw, one of the Commonwealth's most abominable horrors, crawl out from under a crevice and start to chase you down and slash at you. If you aren't confident in your gear and are not totally prepared, you will not be able to defeat him. The reason this room is so jarring is because you end up fighting the beast in such a closed and limited space, and it's not the encounter one would ever expect in such a cramped environment, making the fight even more surprising. Put him down, and you'll find another gunner inside the building. A sergeant, one from the same squad as Private Heart. His body is torn apart, and numerous deathclaw eggs are scattered and broken across the floor. Looks like someone tried to shake the nest. Sergeant Lee's holotape says it all. What we can infer is that these eggs were what was inside this case that Lee took inside the building after they locked themselves in. After an accident with the Deathclaw, only one of those eggs remained, and Sergeant Lee guarded it with his life.
A nest full of Deathclaw eggs. A dozen, maybe more. Smashed to bits. Except this one. No wonder they wouldn't tell us what was in that case. If I'd known, I would have personally told the gunner bosses in that glorified liquor cabinet in Wellingham to take those Diamond City caps and stuff them. Guess we know why that Deathclaw tracked us all the way from Linwoods now. They stole our damn kids. Christ. Maybe if we just return the eggs. Oh, hey, Mama. You looking for this?
Picking up the egg will initiate a side quest where you can take the egg back to its original nest. In doing so, a Deathclaw will emerge from its grotto and simply stare at you. It's unclear whether its intentions are to thank you or hunt you, but it does nothing more than stare right through you. If you have something you'd like us to cover, please let us know. We're always taking requests. Until next time. universe of both Portal games have a collective total of over 100 Easter eggs and counting, not even including the ones having to do with the main stories such as Doug Ratman's insanity or the mystery behind GLaDOS' more human side. You can watch our other Portal videos covering these topics, but this video is going to focus on something a little off the beaten path.
The games concocted by the masterminds over at Valve have no shortage of these crazy references. Some of them are crucial to the plot of the game, while others are thrown in there with no rhyme or reason, other than to just reinforce that feeling of uneasiness while you play.
Portal 2 has been out for nearly 6 years, and there's still so much uncharted territory left to explore. With the amount of subtlety these Easter eggs are presented with, it's very easy to simply leave a room and miss out on a few of them. Did you know the painting at the beginning of the game changes from a day scene to a night scene when Wheatley helps you break out?
How about one of Ratman's drawings showing the papers being tossed with 3 numbers, 2, 1, and 9. The same numbers that appear on page 11 of the Lab Rat comic as a phone number that should be dialed in the case of a rogue AI. These hidden delicacies are what successfully submerge the player in such an atmospheric, almost realistic tale.
I think it's time we shine a light somewhere else. Somewhere away from all the bigger and more noticeable Easter eggs. Away from all the Ratmans and the Black Maces of the Portal universe.
Would you believe us if we told you it's possible to travel to a metaphorical hell in Portal 2? Just look at the evidence. You face GLaDOS for your first time in the game after failing to make your escape. She leads you straight to her chamber, a small boss fight sequence begins, and she's replaced with Wheatley, who then becomes overwhelmed with power.
GLaDOS' new potato form accompanies you in plummeting over 4,200 meters down a shaft, leading to a dismantled maze of debris underneath Aperture. We'll get to why this drop is significant later. We've only scratched the surface.
The first important bit of information that comes with knowing the significance behind this deathly plummet is the mythology. Greek mythology, that is.
In Greek lore, there was a titan that disobeyed the gods and took it upon himself to give the flames of Olympus to mankind. This flame represented a divine knowledge that only the gods, snuggled up in their grottos above, had the authority to control. When the gods caught wind of this act of treachery, a punishment fit for only the most wicked was in order.
This titan's name was Prometheus, directly translated to mean forethought. Prometheus met with a harsh sentencing, one that would subjugate him for only as long as the gods deemed it sufficient. For giving the fires of Olympus to the humans down below, Prometheus was cast down to Tartarus, a region deep within the pits of Hades where the wicked are tormented, endlessly and mercilessly.
This location isn't exactly a place you can travel to in the Portal universe, but just like always, there is a location that references it. GLaDOS waits for you at the end of the 5th chapter. You and Wheatley have just tried to escape Aperture Laboratories for good, leaving the dilapidated rubble of the facility in the dust. She isn't too happy about that. Confronting her and fighting her will result in a core transmission, where Wheatley will take the place of GLaDOS. Because of his brittle mentality, he will have power he won't know what to do with. He will become corrupted. And a weakened GLaDOS will make the mistake of sending him over the edge. He will react by sending you down and around. In theory, being dropped from a height of 4,200 meters would result in a fall of about 900 feet per second, rounding off to about 700 miles an hour. That's nearly as fast as a bullet fired from an assault rifle, which is pretty fast. Any mortal human would surely meet their end at the bottom. Those numbers do seem arbitrary enough until you realize that this distance was the exact same distance fallen by Prometheus, the traitor of Olympus. A scripted cutscene of Shell recuperating from her fall will play. When this happens, don't feel shy to explore around a bit. Once you start ascending the ruins, there will be a building bigger than the others. The number 9 is inscribed on the building, along with the name of the location, Tartarus.
So, what does this mean exactly? Might this be an implicit nod to Shell or GLaDOS being the representation of the treacherous Titan? If you want to stretch it even further, and I mean stretch, there's always a small possibility that Shell may have died during the drop. You're only playing as a metaphysical reconstruction of her conscious. This would explain why there's such a pivotal atmosphere change from Chapter 6 and the rest of the game. But that's a pretty big maybe. Perhaps one that we'll talk about in another episode.
Prometheus was punished by the gods for giving the gift of knowledge to man. He was cast into the bowels of the earth and pecked by birds. It won't be enough.
For now, if you'd like to see any more dark theories and creepy subplots in Portal, let us know. Until next time.
Hello, and, again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer Aided Enrichment Center. We hope your brief detention in the relaxation vault has been a pleasant one. Your specimen has been processed, and we are now ready to begin the test proper.
I remember my first playthrough of this game. I had gotten to maybe the 8th room before I finally decided it was just too challenging. I stopped playing it for a while and kept telling myself there would be a day in the future where I would revisit it. Try to finish what I started, you know? Well, a few months ago, back when I recorded the Doug Ratman episode, I heard that there was more to the backstory than meets the proverbial eye. Picking up the game again, I was able to touch base on a few things that happened in the Portal timeline. Things that normally wouldn't be enough to bat an eye upon first glance, but the longer the game was out, the smarter people got. Gamers went into the backstory expecting to discover a Half-Life 3 Easter egg or a few references to other games in the future Valve may have been planning, but instead was rewarded with something much darker. For those of you just joining in on this series, first, let me say thank you for taking your time to watch. Second, if you hate spoilers as much as I do and haven't completed the game, do yourself a favor and don't. GLaDOS has clutched the role of primary antagonist in both Portal games. Your character, Shell, is given a plethora of rigorous puzzles to solve, or test by, as GLaDOS likes to word it. Without going into further analysis of the timeline, the only two things we can really know for sure about her are she's an emotionless, conscienceless AI core, and she really wants to kill you for some reason. That said, have you ever looked closely at her frame? Her auto-tune-esque voice is unsettling enough, but there's something about her appearance that just seems frightening. Well, when I researched it a little more, I found out what it was actually meant to be. People discovered a correlation between GLaDOS' body and a woman, who appeared to have been bound and gagged violently. This raised the question, was GLaDOS always an AI? Or was there something people weren't considering about her past? Was she a human? Let's look more into this. There was a character that didn't get much mention in Portal 2. Her name was Carolyn, Cave Johnson's assistant and secretary of Aperture Science. After falling victim to traumatic cases of poisoning from the asbestos in the testing rooms, Mr. Johnson soon came to terms with his inevitable death. Running the labs of Aperture for over 30 years, as the lore suggests, it can be a bit emotional having to part with something you created. So, he wanted to preserve it, save Aperture, and still take advancing steps towards the pinnacle of scientific discovery, even in death. He knew he had to have a replacement, so he turned to the only person he could depend on, his assistant, Carolyn. What this meant was, if Mr. Johnson were to pass away before his science of brain mapping could be perfected, and it was too late to save his intelligence, Carolyn would instead be the one to take his place, leaving her essentially immortal.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad! I don't want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these? Demand to see life's manager. Make life rue the day it thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemon. I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down.
Around here is where the backstory becomes heavily victim to misinterpretation. Because of GLaDOS' eager agreement with Mr. Johnson on his notorious rant towards the end of the Science Innovators puzzles, it was once believed that GLaDOS was indeed Mr. Johnson himself. Despite his obsession with advancement towards storing his own gray matter into an AI, there really is no proof that he actually succeeded in doing so. Listen to the rest of the speech.
The point is, if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one? So I have the engineers figuring that out now. Brain mapping, artificial intelligence. We should have been working on it 30 years ago. I will say this, and I'm gonna say it on tape so everybody hears it 100 times a day. If I die before you people can pour me into a computer, I want Carolyn to run this place. Now she'll argue. She'll say she can't. She's modest like that, but you make her. Yeah, put her in my computer. I don't care. All right, test's over. You can head on back to your desk.
Goodbye, sir.
Still don't believe me? Let's rewind a bit, earlier into the game. We're still in the Science Innovators levels, and Mr. Johnson's audio recordings can still be heard from an intercom unit. In one particular recording, not only does he mention Carolyn, but for the first time in the game, and only very seldom after that, you hear Carolyn speak. Listen to GLaDOS' reaction.
The testing area is just up ahead. The quicker you get through, the quicker you'll get your $60.
Hold on.
Carolyn, are the compensation vouchers ready?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. Why did I just... Who is that? What the hell is going on here? Carolyn, why do I know this woman? Did I kill her? Or... Oh my god. Look, you're doing a great job. Can you handle things for yourself for a while? I need to think.
What was her motivation for responding that way? The dialogue insinuates that she was unaware of her own thoughts, almost as though she was forced into saying it. The events that transpired after Caroline was presumably forced into the machine are not focused in the narrative. But in the original Portal comic, Lab Rat, written and declared canon by Valve, the AI was considered to be extremely volatile, and would try to kill the scientist within a very short time after they turned her on. 1/16 of a picosecond, to be precise. And eventually she succeeded. On Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, neurotoxins were released into the lab vents, resulting in the untimely and unfortunate deaths of thousands of Aperture's workers and scientists. And finally, the most irrefutable piece of evidence yet. In the end cutscene of the game, GLaDOS is not only able to acknowledge that Carolyn has always been a part of her, but takes whatever of her conscience is left and deletes it from her memory. Carolyn is now dead for good. This isn't really a theory, this has been declared official by Valve. There were still so many things I wanted to touch up on, but for the sake of consistency, decided not to. The plot is so meticulously detailed. Half of this entire series is now about Portal. I've made 2 episodes about this game just explaining backstory, and an additional one being theory. and still there's so much to see. So if there's something I missed or you have a theory of your own, please feel free to put it in the comments section. Until then, we'll be waiting. Before continuing on with the video, I'd like to give a personal shout out to Kikoskia for providing the footage of the game we are discussing. His channel is in the description below. Please check him out. He's a great Let's Player. If you're watching this, thank you so much. This video could not have been done without your help. In July of 2012, a Taiwanese teenager booked a room at an internet cafe on a Friday evening, proceeded to sit down, open his laptop, and start playing the widely popular MMO, Diablo 3. After a non-stop 40-hour session lasting all the way into Sunday morning, the teenager was eventually found in a heavy sleep. Upon being woken up, he took several steps around and collapsed immediately. He had been sitting in the position for so long that the blood clotted up and stopped circulation to the entire bottom portion of his body. A few years earlier, in 2005 to be exact, a man in South Korea fell victim to a fatal case of malnourishment and dehydration after logging in around 50 hours of gameplay to fuel his StarCraft addiction. His last words were to his friend, saying he would stop playing soon, when his eyes closed and he fell back in his chair, pronounced dead instantly. So, why am I giving you this history lesson? Well, people need to understand that death is really its own tragedy. There's really nothing we can do to stop it from coming. There has always been, and will probably always be, controversy encircling what killed these people. Malnourishment, cardiac arrest, inactivity, epilepsy. You can name off plenty of factors that can be easily backed up with a little research and a good argument. But what makes this case in particular so controversial and so mortifying is the context in which these two victims died. This case is commonly referred to as the curse of Evil Otto. Berserk saw its debut in 1980 in arcade machines across the world. It pretty much revolutionized what we see as video games. Concept was new, a speech function enabled the game to communicate with the player. The controls were fluent and they just, well, worked. It was a really great game. The footage you are seeing here is not the arcade version. This is Berserk on the Atari, released a couple years after people decided the arcade versions were no longer convenient and wanted to take it home with them in cartridge form. When Berserk first came out, that's exactly how everyone looked at it. Revolutionary, one of a kind, groundbreaking. And then something happened one day. Something that threw the gaming industry under heavy fire and harsh criticism ever since, and turned what used to be a near flawless game into the controversial epicenter of tragedy. Allow me to introduce one of gaming's most condescending, terrifying villains ever to be known. Evil Otto. He doesn't look that scary, does he? If there's one thing speculation has taught us, it's that looks don't make the villain. It's the story behind the villain. And Evil Otto's story might just be the dimmest one of them all. In the game, Evil Otto has multiple functions. His bouncing animation was peculiar enough because games hadn't seen technology being worked in a way where such an animation could look visually convincing. Also, he was indestructible. He could phase through walls, and when you killed enough enemies on the screen, could accelerate drastically. Don't worry about fighting him. If you see him, it's in your best interest to run. It is at this point in the video where we are obligated to warn our viewers that the following information has faced extreme controversy. This might be terrifying to some and tragically depressing to others. Please handle what is being said with an open mind and don't jump to conclusions. In 1981, a man named Jeff Daly reportedly died of a heart attack while playing Berserk after attaining an impressive score of 16,660 points. It is important to note he died while playing and did not get a chance to post his official score. The owner of the arcade testifies that day that Daly was out of shape and that he was out of breath from the moment he arrived until he dropped. Sounds like a logical explanation. Next year, Peter Burkowski was in no such condition and tragically died from an almost identical situation. After posting 2 high scores that landed in the top 10, he also died of cardiac arrest, literally on the spot after letting go of the machine, and was already in the process of putting a quarter in another game. Strange coincidence? A lot of people like to think so. The understandable circumstances with Daly are able to counterclaim a lot of theories out there, but the articles about Burkowski seem to have been written in more detail, such as the name of the arcade, the name of the arcade owner, the city, and other factors as well. These were the first 2 video game deaths ever recorded in human history, and the fact that both tragedies happened within mere seconds of grabbing the controller poses the question, what if it's not? What if it's not a coincidence and there's something more behind this game people aren't considering? Well, to tell you the truth, no one really knows. There will always be an unanswerable question, and like every unknown variable, we must ask ourselves, is it something we really want to know? If you guys remember from last time, I described Portal as the golden example of the phrase, don't dig too deep. Now, the theories I covered in the previous episode of Portal, to be fair, weren't really theories. They were just things you could try out on your own downtime to creep you out and give you that uneasy sensation. Upon request, I'm putting my big boy pants on and digging a bit deeper into the controversial pit of speculation and horror that is Portal. They say terror is the most impacting where it is put in the place where you won't be looking for it. The more innocent something seems to be on the surface, the easier it is to corrupt. So many gamers find themselves entangled by the innocence of Portal, the puzzle game, that they pay no mind to and are completely oblivious to Portal, the survival horror title. Have you ever been locked away in an abandoned science lab with an artificial intelligence surveying and controlling your every move? Taunting you about how your parents left you on a doorstep, breathing in the same air for all eternity, and being the obsessive target of a madman? Doesn't sound like something you could slap an E10 rating on, huh? There are 7 hidden dens you can discover in the game, closed off and secluded from the testing environment. First few are pretty easy to find, but they get progressively harder to reach, and the game forces you to search for them. Each den is accompanied with a spontaneous horror-like theme music, and scribbles that look like they were drawn with the most half-assed collection of crayons you could find at Office Depot. As you traverse the testing facility and uncover more of the dens, they start to tell a story. A story of a mentally damaged scientist driven to the point of an irreversible insanity after seeing something GLaDOS supposedly did before the Portal timeline. presumably poisoning and killing everyone in the entire Aperture laboratory. He started hiding out in the dens, making incomprehensible scribbles at first, but then turned into schematics. Blueprints drawn on the concrete walls of every den, revealing what looked to be a plot to disassemble GLaDOS, the very beast he had a strong hand in creating. Kind of ironic. This is especially noticeable in the 5th den in Mission 12, and in the last den, a poorly drawn portrait of Shell. It's pretty unnerving, looking at a drawing of yourself scribbled on a wall by a mentally deteriorated psychopath. But if you listen closely, you can hear speaking in the background, on the other side of the wall, almost like a rhythmic chanting of some sort. This is believed to be Doug Ratman, an ex-Aperture scientist driven insane with paranoia and fright. If you have a keen enough ear to listen to the rambling, you'll find that he makes a questionable reference to the ship Borealis, saying it was stolen. But Bruce, that's such an old Easter egg, everyone knows that. Well, he also makes a reference to Cave Johnson being his uncle, as well as speaking of Black Mesa, Aperture's largest business rival, saying it's where it all started. Where what all started? After hearing the chanting and exiting the den, you'll notice the area is no longer accessible. Boarded up after you left, he was in the room with you, leading anyone to believe that it was the closest encounter you have with Ratman in the game. Or is it? In the beginning of Chapter 5, you're finally making your first strides to escape the facility. Just in case it miraculously slipped by you before, Wheatley makes another reference to Doug Ratman.